Did the needles hurt?
Right. I mean, I didn't come from a well-to-do family. You know, we dealt with food insecurities and the nutrients, bring the white blood cells, bring whatever it is that you need to repair this damage to this area, because there is an issue here. Okay. And the needles do that. I was blessed to go to a good school system, and I really learned early on that that's, you know, education is key.
When you cut yourself, it's like, hey, your body goes into fight or flight. Like, hey, we need to repair this one spot. So
numerous other jobs. I worked in kitchens for years, which I love to cook still to this day. There's points on the fingers that are pretty sensitive. Points on the toes, same deal, pretty sensitive. Points in the ears, pretty sensitive. After about 5 to 10 seconds or so, it subsides.
Welcome back to the Let's Evolve for Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Tyrone, and we help aspiring, new, and existing entrepreneurs excel to the next level by inviting other aspiring, new, and existing entrepreneurs to the podcast to give knowledge and information on how to get to the next level. Today, we have a very special guest, someone that's completely different background. He's an acupuncturist. He's been in the business now for about 10 years, graduated around 2012. So for those of you who are not familiar with that space, he's going to give a lot of information. His name is Rick Aguirre. He's going to actually pronounce the last name the correct way. This is actually me trying. So at the beginning, I'm like, how do you pronounce your last name again? But without further ado, he's going to give you some background, give you some history, and we'll go from there. Rick, thanks for joining the podcast, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, it's Aguirre.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, man, just give us some background on yourself and whatever else you want to share with us on how you got started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I graduated 2012 from American Acupuncture, or from the American Institute of Alternative Medicine.
Okay.
It's right here in Columbus. As far as I know, that's still the only accredited school for acupuncture in the state of Ohio, so I was very fortunate it was here in town. Finished up the Chinese herbal program back in 2019, and I had to go to Philly once a month for 2 years for that. That was much less convenient.
Absolutely.
And currently, I'm in the doctoral program through Pacific College of Health and Science. Fortunately, that's all online, so I can attend in the convenience of my home.
Okay.
So I don't have to commute,
right.
So that's very nice. But I work with a business partner and a friend of mine, longtime friend, which is phenomenal. It's great working, being able to work with friends. At our clinic is called North Star Acupuncture LLC, and it's in Uptown Westerville. We've been operational for, about 8 years now.
Okay.
We've been working together, and it's great. We've been seeing, actually for the past few months now, we've been seeing record numbers of patients. Every other week, it seems like for the past 2 months, we've been setting sales records. So things are going really well. A lot of helping a lot of people, and that's what it's all about.
Gotcha. So how many patients do you see a day on average?
I average probably about 16 to 20. Just depends on the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And are a lot of these repeat customers, or?
Yeah, a lot of patients, because anytime you get into a regiment, when you're working on something, most times it requires anywhere from 3 to 5 sessions to really get an idea of what kind of lasting results you can anticipate from a treatment like acupuncture. If it's more chronic conditions, a lot of times we'll be working into the 5 to 7 visit range until we can get them to a maintenance phase when we start to see them, on an ongoing basis, maybe a couple times a month, maybe once a month, or just as needed for acute flare-ups for any given situation.
Gotcha. So acute flare-ups, so that could happen anywhere on your body?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's a lot easier to come up with a list of stuff that acupuncture isn't good for than a list of stuff that acupuncture is good for.
Gotcha.
That's a common question. People are always asking me, what does it treat? I mean, there's not really a whole lot we can't work on.
Okay.
I think Chinese medicine, because acupuncture, of course, is a modality that falls under the umbrella of traditional Chinese medicine, and that's TCM is sometimes as it's referred to. So that's going to include acupuncture, a modality called moxibustion, where we actually burn herbs close to the body for a thermal therapeutic effect. Cupping, of course, some people are probably familiar with cupping, especially when it comes to sports medicine applications. Used a lot for pain management, but some people use it for detoxification. We also, of course, herbs is big. That's basically like the other half of Chinese medicine. If Chinese medicine were a two-sided coin. One side would be acupuncture, the other side would be herbs.
Okay.
And it's a huge part of it. The things that acupuncture takes a long time to address, herbs is very efficient at, and vice versa.
So I have to ask, right?
Sure.
There are a lot of people that don't know a lot about acupuncture. You know, some people may not believe in it, and I'm assuming, I don't want to say I'm sure, but I'm assuming, since I'm curious about it, that a lot of people are probably curious to say, okay, well, how do I know if it really works? I don't want a bunch of people sticking me with needles. That doesn't make sense.
Sure.
You know, I don't believe in that practice. Just give me a pill and I'll be fine. Like, how do you actually, and just really diving right into it, like, how do you, you know, educate them on the process to make them understand what you do, why you do, and how you do it?
Well, that's always a part of the initial consultation.
Okay.
If they can have enough of an open mind to come into my office, then that right there is a good indication that it might work for them.
Mm-hmm.
The only time I've seen acupuncture absolutely not work for someone is when they come into the office, I don't want to say under duress, but when somebody forces them to come in
Okay.
and they've already decided that it's not going to work. And I mean, I feel like that's pretty much the case for any type of therapeutic. If you go into it already having decided that it's not going to work, your mind makes that true, and it won't work.
Okay.
So as long as you come into the office and you're open-minded about it, then we can have that conversation. And basically that it goes a little something like the discussion of what traditional Chinese medicine is, like the foundations, the core principles behind it, the dynamics at play, and basically what I explain to them is the theory is that there's channels that run all throughout the body, and the body transports energy, or qi as it's referred to, along these channels. And you can have blockages along these channels, and that will usually result in a fixed pain condition. Sometimes it's numbness, sometimes it's tingling. If it's severe enough, it can be loss of function, but most often it's pain or some kind of discomfort. These channels are also associated with internal organs or some other internal body mechanism, like the reproductive system. So you can have relatively excess or deficient conditions on these channels, and over time those imbalances are what give rise to various medical conditions.
Okay.
So there's hundreds of points on these channels. I'm sure if you Google an acupuncture chart, it'll pull up a picture of a body. It has all these points all over it. All these different points do different things. They have their own actions and indications. But essentially, we're using any combination of those points to try and get the body back to a state of balance. So if there's a blockage of some kind that's causing pain, the treatment principle is to focus on moving energy and blood, or energy and blood through that region to relieve any pain it's causing. If there were to be an excess or a deficient condition, we're really trying to sedate excess conditions, tonify deficient conditions, get the body back to a state of equilibrium so essentially it can heal itself. Because that's really what we're trying to do, is facilitate the body's ability to heal itself.
Okay. So I will say, right, everything that you said, or a lot of it, kind of went over my head, right? Like, I have the gist of it. So I would say, for me and for the listeners, if you had to explain that to a 10-year-old, how would you take everything that you just said and really just break that down? The reason I say that, because if you have someone at any age, right, someone that's 20, 30, 40, and they're like, man, I hear about acupuncture, but I need to understand it on a different level, so to where I can digest it, that takes away a lot of the medical terminology, and something that's a little more relatable.
Well, everybody's body can heal itself.
Okay.
You know, you get a cut on your arm. If you wait long enough, it will heal itself. So your body has that capacity. It has the ability to heal itself. What we're trying to do is facilitate that process, and if possible, you know, expedite that process. You know, speed that process up. And a lot of times that's through, you know, bringing of nutrients and fluids and blood to that region to kind of help that process along.
Okay.
You know, and that's really what it comes down to.
So bloods and nutrients influence to that point.
Sure.
So how do you do that?
And that's what the acupuncture needles do. When you introduce any foreign body into the internal environment of anybody's body, it's going to cause an immediate immune system response. So it's going to flood the body, just as a physiological response to that incident, is going to flood that area with white blood cells. It's going to flood that area with you know, fluids and nutrients that are going to fight any infection. They're going to address inflammation, and they're going to initiate that healing process. And that's what the needles are doing at a physiological level.
That makes sense. Okay, so it's almost like when the body goes into a self-healing process. Like you said, to your point, when you cut yourself, it's like, hey, your body goes into fight or flight. Like, hey, we need to repair this one spot. So what I get from what you're saying is the needles kind of say, hey, it's kind of like how do I say this? More of a, we want the body to think there's a cut here, so we want to rush the blood and the nutrients to that one spot to heal it. Right? Yep. Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah, we're just trying to indicate to the body that, hey, this area needs attention.
Okay.
Like, bring the facilitating, or bring the, you know, the nutrients, bring the white blood cells, bring whatever it is that you need to repair this damage to this area, because there is an issue here. Okay. And the needles do that.
Okay. Do the needles hurt?
You know,
I have to ask.
It's a needle. So,
well, some people are afraid of needles.
Right? Yeah. Some points are just by nature more sensitive than others. So you have there's points on the fingers that are pretty sensitive. Points on the toes, same deal, pretty sensitive. Points in the ears, pretty sensitive. Okay. For the most part, you get an initial sensation on insertion, and then after about 5 to 10 seconds or so, it subsides. Okay. And there's a couple schools of thought on that, honestly. Some of the older school Chinese practitioners, they really want you to feel it. It's the sensation is called da qi. So that's the arrival of qi. Okay. And that's what they're looking for. They'll use thicker needles. They, you know, go a little deeper with their insertions. They stimulate the points until they elicit that sensation. Japanese practitioners, or there's a Japanese style of practice where it's very superficial insertion. It's you know, just kind of hanging on the surface of the skin there. So our style at North Star is a little more the middle of the road. Mm-hmm. I've never found it necessary to elicit a really strong sensation to get the results that I'm looking for. Okay. So usually what I tell folks is, I don't mind that initial zing, but I don't want anything that burns, stings, aches, throbs, anything like that after about 3 to 5 seconds. Okay. So if it's uncomfortable after that time period, let me know so I can get that adjusted, or I may just remove the point altogether. Okay.
So when you say to the point of qi, so what's the translation of that?
Qi, that's a good question. So a rough translation, which is the best we can do, because Chinese is it deals with a lot of kind of metaphysical concepts in a word. Right. But qi, as best I could describe it, is our life force. Okay. So the energy that exists within us when we're alive, and that, you know, separates from our body when we pass. Okay. So that energy flows through all of these channels. And each of the channels is associated with a different internal organ, or like I said, a different internal body mechanism. So there's liver, spleen, heart, kidney, you know, lungs, stomach. You know, those are all obviously internal organs, and there's associated channels, and the different channels are associated with different dynamics within the body.
Okay. So when you have someone that's coming in for therapy, right? So they have the acupuncture therapy, and then they have physical therapy. Would you say that one is better than the other, or do you recommend that someone do both?
So right now I'm a semester into my doctoral program, and a big focus in that program is striving towards a pluralistic model of medicine. And integrative medicine used to be like the catchphrase, and even still to this day, a lot of hospitals, you know, say that's what they're going for, is, you know, they have an integrative medicine unit. I think even OSU has an integrative medicine unit. The problem with integrative medicine is they're trying to like kind of put it all together into one, you know, into one practice. And when you do that, you lose some of the important components of a practice like Chinese medicine. Okay. So a notion that they've kind of settled on a little more in the doctoral program that I'm attending is a pluralistic model. Mm-hmm. So each of the different practices can maintain their, you know, almost sovereignty, if you will, mm-hmm. you know, so they can preserve their, you know, all of the things that make them unique and make them effective, while also working in tandem with the other practices. So that's really my focus, is striving for a pluralistic practice where I can work with physical therapists, or I can work with medical doctors, mm-hmm. and we could work in unison to achieve the best outcome for patients.
Okay. Excuse me, that makes sense. I was always kind of curious about that, because, you know, it's like, okay, is it one over the other? Or to your point, if it's more of a pluralistic approach, then it's like, okay, hey, you will work on phase 1, we work on phase 2, you work on phase 3.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's peel the layers back a little bit. Right? So let's talk about life before becoming a chiropractor? I mean, obviously, I have an advantage. Acupuncture.
Yeah.
Oh my, I'm sorry, I missed it too.
People do it all the time. No worries.
Acupuncturist, right?
Yeah.
Peeling back the layers on that. Obviously, I knew the life
Sure.
before then, but just, you telling it from your perspective.
Well, I was originally a psych major, and so I always knew that I wanted to go into some manner of health care, or at least be of service to others. I knew that I wanted to help people,
Right.
and I think a lot of that comes from just kind of a tough life as a kid.
Right.
I mean, I didn't come from a well-to-do family. We dealt with food insecurities, and my parents separated shortly after they moved here from Texas, and both households really struggled for a long time. But I was blessed to go to a good school system, and I really learned early on that's education is key. To really empower yourself. Knowledge is essential. So, not to say that I was the best student. Right. For a long time, I was very average when it came to my academics.
Okay.
But a lot of that was application, not me not applying myself, or, and sometimes I genuinely struggled wrapping my head around the material. But I think what really did it for me was my perseverance. Like, once I decided I wanted to do something, that was really what kind of got me there. It wasn't necessarily that I was this overachiever, that I did so well, that I was like this, exceptional student. It was just that I kept going and going and going and going until I got it done.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was originally a psychology major, and I knew that I wanted to help people. But back when I was in school still, the psychology field was starting to, it was starting to really be affected by the pharmacological industry.
Okay.
And there was a lot of over-medicating, in my opinion, especially of children, and that was what really concerned me. And so I kind of became disenchanted with that, and I still love the field, but I knew that I didn't want to be doling out medicines. I knew that I didn't want to be a social worker, because I had seen some people go down that road. So I kind of got away from it. I did numerous other jobs. I worked in kitchens for years, which I love to cook still to this day. I even considered going to culinary school, but the hours were just not for me.
Right.
And a lot of folks that I knew that were lifelong food service industry workers just seemed genuinely unhappy.
So it's like, that's not the field for me.
Yeah, no. So, not to say that it's not a good field. If it's a good fit for you, great. But
Right.
I knew that it wasn't a good fit for me.
Right.
So I got into a few different other things. I worked in call centers for a long time. That's where we met.
Absolutely.
Working at the call center for the financial institution that will remain unnamed.
Right.
I worked at call centers for a long time. Also, I knew that wasn't for me, because I think probably about 5 years into working for Chase, well, not even, like 2 years into working for that company, I had gained 30 pounds. My blood pressure was up. I was stressed out, and my doctor was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Nothing. I sit all day long, every day." And I was starting to have health issues, so I felt like I needed to make a change. A little bit in between here and there, I worked in construction. I worked at different odd jobs, but it was when I was working at Chase that I actually started school and went through the whole process and finished that up. And then around the time that I was taking my board exams was when I left that place.
So, quick question. Before you
Sure.
went down the path of becoming an acupuncturist,
Sure.
let's go back to psychology, right? So,
Yeah.
you left Texas, you moved here, family split, you're still focused on psychology. You say you weren't the best student, but you still made it work.
Yeah.
Did you finish? Did you finish college at that time?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I got, I want to say 94 credit hours. No, wait, it was 86 credit hours. I got to that point where I had taken so many psychology electives I couldn't take anymore.
Okay.
But again, I was convinced I was going to be a clinical psychologist. So it was about that time that I shifted away from that, and I started looking at other fields. Every time I would switch occupations, I would say, okay, well, I'm going to study this in school, and I wouldn't actually change my major, but I would shift directions until I found acupuncture.
Gotcha. So you worked various jobs. You were cooking for a while. So you entered financial services. So why that point? Like, what was that pivotal moment where you said, okay, it's really time for me to change, and when I change this time, I'm going to stay focused on that one thing?
Well, I think that was the discovery of acupuncture, honestly. My friend that I was, lifelong friend, we've been friends for, 20 plus years now. He had been going to school out in LA for Chinese medicine, and he would come home and he would practice on me and a mutual friend of ours.
Okay.
And I always thought it was, it was cool. I didn't really know a whole lot about it myself at the time, so I didn't think too much of it. But eventually, he came back to Columbus and set up his practice in Worthington. And at the time, I think I was actually contracting, and I hurt my knee.
Okay.
And it was a pretty significant injury. I couldn't put a whole lot of weight on it, and I didn't have insurance at the time. So I went to see him, and he was able to get 95% functionality back for me with one treatment. And
wow.
That blew me away. I was like, that's incredible.
Okay. So you were sold at that point.
Not quite, because I'm kind of a skeptical person by nature. So I was like, that's awesome. I don't know what just happened. I'm glad my knee feels better, but that was weird.
Okay.
So not long after that, I hurt my rotator cuff, and also pretty significant. I couldn't lay on it. I couldn't carry anything. And I went in to see him again, and again, this time it took about 3 treatments, and there were several different modalities. We used the cupping, we used the acupuncture, but again, it was like 95% recovery without medications, without surgery. And at that point, he really had my attention. I was like, there's really something legitimate going on here.
Okay.
And he was also able to help me with some of the depression issues that I struggled with as an adolescent and into my early 20s. And that's, I think, what really kind of clinched it for me, because being somebody that was interested in psychology, I saw that this has psychological applications, not just physiological applications. So I can help the people that I was hoping to help with psychology, along with all of these other people that have these physiological issues, and reach even more people.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So from a psychological standpoint, right? Sure. I know we were talking about the acupuncture, the pins, and the needles and stuff. But when it comes to the psychological piece, how do you focus on that? I mean, I'm sure you're not I'm assuming that you're not taking needles and just sticking them in someone's head, right? Or that could be the case. I don't know. But I'm very curious, and I'm sure other people are curious too.
Oh, you get needles in your head.
Okay.
No, but there's a lot of commonly used points. There's one on the top of the head. There's one right here that are, and they have their own indications. But so from a psychological standpoint, specifically with like depression, stress, anxiety, which are the most common, things that we work on.
Exactly.
The liver in Chinese medicine is considered to govern the smooth flow of energy through all of the channels, and it's particularly susceptible to stress. So anytime you have a stress-related condition, you're going to want to address the liver. The liver and the kidney are closely associated, so you'll also be working on some kidney points. The liver and gallbladder are basically, they call it internally, externally related, which is a Chinese medicine notion, but anatomically they're both basically in the same position. So you also be working on the gallbladder channel. So what you're looking to do is calm the spirit, especially if there's a stress condition. You're really trying to get everything to settle down, and you do that I do that by using very symmetrical points. The same points on both sides of the body, up and down. And there's points that are specific for psychological issues. So there's a point on the wrist that really helps to calm the spirit, they say in Chinese medicine, because the spirit is housed in the heart. So it's actually a pericardium point, and the pericardium is the sac that surrounds the heart. So it kind of settles that down. There's a point down here on just past the knee. It's actually a gallbladder point, but they say it soothes the liver, which also has kind of a sedating effect. It just kind of settles everything down. It also makes sure everything's flowing the way that it should be, because a lot of times you have that kind of anxiousness because things aren't flowing the way they should be for whatever reason. There's a point right here in the chest, which of course is right over the heart. Well, not anatomically, but in that vicinity. Right. It's very good for calming the spirit and just helping you kind of unbind the chest, because when you get tense, you kind of clench up, and so it says that it unbinds the chest. It also helps release emotional issues, So there's specific points that are good for different psychological conditions. Now, if somebody has more of a depressive type condition, we're really trying to get things moving. So instead of using the same points on both sides, I'll use points that are on the inside of the left leg and on the outside of the right leg, and then vice versa on the arms and the upper extremities, to kind of help facilitate a little more dynamic movement within the body and make sure things are flowing, and or even just getting them flowing if they're not flowing.
Right.
And then there's there's actually a set of 4 points up on the top of the head that help raise energy. And if you get into like a little more esoteric aspects of acupuncture, it's our connection to the universe. But really, from a physiological standpoint, we're really just trying to draw some of that energy up, because in depression you kind of you feel down in the dumps, is what they say.
Right.
So we're trying to raise that energy up.
So how many sessions would someone have to go through to start to notice the changes?
That's a great question, and it's different for every person. Everybody responds differently to treatments. So, a lot of it has to do with the etiology of the issue that we're working on. So if it's something that's acute in nature, meaning it's something that you've been dealing with for maybe through a couple of weeks or maybe even up to a month, usually 1 to 3 sessions, you should see some significant changes, positive changes. If you're dealing with a chronic condition, usually 5 to 7 sessions is the minimum I'd recommend before you can really see what kind of results you can anticipate. And with chronic conditions, a lot of the times what we're looking to do is get you to a point where your symptoms are under control, and then shift more to like a maintenance phase. So where you start in originally coming in, maybe a couple times a week for the first couple weeks, or at least once a week for the first couple weeks, or even a month, till you get to the point where you feel like your symptoms are under control, they're well managed. At that point, we maybe move it out to you're coming in every couple weeks or every few weeks, or maybe even once a month. I have some folks that manage their chronic conditions by coming in as needed on flare-ups, or maybe once every couple months. So it's really different for everybody, and we try to tailor everybody's treatment plan to them specifically and how their body responds to the treatments.
So I noticed you said if someone has been dealing with, I guess their symptoms or whatever it is they're going through for a few weeks to a few months, it may take a couple of sessions. But what about that person that has like a deep traumatic experience that happened in childhood or as a teenager? Would you say that it would take at least, a year or two of treatments for issues or situations like that?
Yeah, so that's going to fall into a chronic category.
Okay.
And absolutely. But something like that, I am absolutely recommending that they reach out to a mental health care professional. They are working in conjunction with their primary care physician and their doctors, and they may need specialists. So that's something where that pluralistic coordination of care really comes into play, because that type of situation, acupuncture by itself will help, but they really need to be making sure that they have the proper support, and even their support network, their personal support network is going to be critical.
Okay. Yeah. So do you find like other professionals, right, psychologists on the psychological side and maybe physical therapists on the physical side, do you ever find them criticizing your practice and the way of treatment?
Not as much as they used to. When I first got into it, and even when my friend was going to school, it was definitely something that was palpable. You could, you would get some eye rolls from Western medicine doctors, but it's gotten a lot better. And I think the key component of that is the research that's been done, through like the National Institute for Health, and through the different programs, through the even my school, is actually is showing that these methods are effective, through clinical research, through randomized control trials, and through systematic reviews of the existing research, and also that insurance companies are starting to pay for it. They're starting to see the benefits. It's much better. When I first started practicing, I think OSU, and there was maybe one other insurance company that would even consider reimbursement for acupuncture. Now it's about 50-50.
Okay.
So they've really come around, and that's making the physicians kind of take a second look, and like, okay, well, the insurance companies are looking at it, and there's this this research that supports the effectiveness of this treatment for this specific condition. there must be something to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the risks associated with acupuncture? 'Cause, just like anything else, there's always risks.
Sure. So we don't really see a whole lot of side effects with acupuncture. More often than not, what we'll see is a little bit of lightheadedness or wooziness. Some people will experience nausea, but this tends to be folks that are prone to overstimulation or what they call needle shock. Mm-hmm. So if you know someone that gets woozy when they get blood drawn, that's somebody that will, will be more likely, I won't say most likely, will be more likely to have a negative or an adverse response to acupuncture. And a lot of that can have to do with the amount of stimulation applied to the needle insertion itself. Mm-hmm. When you get into more serious adverse events, you're looking at, perforation of internal organs, and that's something where we have specific angles of insertion, specific depths, recommendations for each individual point that we have to learn before we can actually obtain our license, because those are all on our board exams, and they're very important on some points, because you have to be very cautious, especially, and you have to take into consideration the anatomy of the person that you're dealing with. Ooh. So you can have a needle insertion on a more robust individual that goes a little deeper than you can on a 85-year-old woman that obviously has some deficiencies, or is just not as as vital and doesn't have the sheer muscle volume that that a younger person would.
Right.
So you just have to be cognizant of those types of factors and make sure that you're within the parameters of the recommended insertion depths and angles.
So I'm assuming you ask a lot of those questions on like their medical history and stuff, right? To kind of determine what you should and should not do.
Yeah, well, I mean, just observation. You can, just through the course of the consultation, which happens at the first treatment for every individual that we see, we have a consultation, and that involves, usually they call it the 10 questions. Okay. But there's usually a lot more than 10 by the time you're done. But, that kind of goes through, and you talk about, what their main concern is, what they want to address primarily, what other issues they might have, because of course acupuncture is a holistic approach to medicine. So we're not just looking at the issue, we're also looking at things that might be related or other things we might be able to assist them with. But you're also observing them. You're seeing what their body type is like. You're checking their pulse. You're looking at their tongue. Those are different diagnostic indicators for Chinese medicine. Okay. So it's a very all-encompassing type of comprehensive analysis of the person, right? Not just their description of the problem.
Okay.
Yep.
So you graduate. So going back, you graduate from school 2012, right? You're now an acupuncturist. So what are some of those milestones and turning points that you experience, because you're in private practice, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of those challenges or milestones you experienced when you first graduated? Like, did the clients just start rushing in the door, or did it take time to build to that point?
Yeah, no, that did not happen.
Okay.
No, I think the biggest milestone for me, my first milestone, was not having to work some random side job,
right,
to keep the lights on. Okay. Yeah, and that took way longer than I expected it to.
Right.
That's something they don't really tell you about in school, how long it's going to take. Unless you have a support network, like you have a partner that, is able to take care of financial things, which at the time I didn't, so it was, I want to say it was probably a good 3 to 4 years before I didn't have to have a side job. Wow. Okay. And even once I started, even when I didn't need a side job, I started off working at a community clinic, and I worked there. Not just because it was a great, not just because it was a great, organization, and I really appreciated their philosophy when it came to, the availability of acupuncture to the community, but also because they paid hourly,
right?
And I needed that guaranteed. Yeah, I needed that guaranteed money, because it's tough. You gotta, when you're out there trying to market yourself and you're still working at the same time, and it's a challenge, just like any other just starting any other businesses. There's those times early on where you're like, I may have made a mistake.
Right.
I don't know if this is going to work out.
So what pushed you to stick with it? Because you didn't have the clients, you didn't have the financial support or backing, and you're like, man, okay, yes, I have this over here, but I'm tired of doing this side job thing. Sure. Why didn't you quit on that path?
Just just the support of amazing friends and family, my faith, and that perseverance that I once I've decided on something, that I have something set in my head of what I want to do. It's I don't really see a whole lot of other options. I almost kind of get tunnel vision, and I just keep plodding along until I get there. And that's that's I think that's probably what pushed me through the herb program, because that was a huge challenge. That was probably my next milestone. Was doing the herbs, because it's not required. You can be an acupuncturist in the state of Ohio and never have to learn a single herb. But I knew that it was a huge part of Chinese medicine, and I felt like that was something that was worth at least investigating. So I started looking into it, and at a certain point, a colleague of mine reached out and she said, "Hey, I'm really thinking about doing this. Would you want to do it with me, and we could carpool?" And I talked about it with my wife at the time, and she said, "Yeah, might as well do it. If you don't do it now, you may never do it."
Exactly.
And that's the kind of support that that I'm talking about. Like, and of course, my family has always been a source of encouragement. I've been very blessed with them to always have my back. And I think that's probably where I get that perseverance. Is because I always know that they're supporting me. They got my back 100%.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how did you start? So you went right into private practice, correct?
No, I started. I did, but I was seeing like a couple of patients a month.
Okay.
So I don't even know if you can really call that private practice.
Was it out of your home, or did you purchase a building, or how did you start
I did
off?
start seeing patients out of my home, but that really wasn't the look that I wanted. I wanted to have an office. I wanted to have a brick and mortar somewhere where people came to see me. I felt like that was really more along the lines of the image that I wanted to convey to people. And so I worked with friends a lot of the times out of their offices. I would either rent space, or we'd do a split. And I worked with, actually, one of the practitioners that I worked with was like the second practitioner in the state. Oh, wow. His license number was literally 2. So I worked with him for a while, and it was great, but I learned a lot of things that I did want to do, a lot of things that I didn't want to do, and the whole thing is just a learning process. I think that's something else that any entrepreneur will tell you. Like, you can go to school, but probably 60-70% of the stuff that you end up really needing to know that is most critical, you learn through trial and error, just by sheer experience. And so the private practice was great, but I think the community clinic was absolutely crucial for me, not only monetarily, but also from a practice standpoint, because they booked us out every 15 minutes. And there was a room with 8 chairs. So I have people coming in every 15 minutes. So I needed to get quick. I needed to get proficient at my craft.
Right.
And I needed to do it immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I couldn't take, because I remember when I first started practicing, I would take a half hour to get all the points into somebody that I wanted to use. And that's not an option when you have somebody coming in every 15 minutes. So it got me proficient. It exposed me to a couple of other techniques that we also don't. We hear about in school, but they don't necessarily teach you in school. So that was also crucial for me to learn. To kind of expand my knowledge base and add some other skills to my wheelhouse for sure.
Okay, so would you say that was like the turning point in your practice, where it's like, okay, I'm glad I stuck with this because now it's paying off?
Yeah, I'd say so. The community clinic was really crucial, and honestly, I transitioned from just doing community acupuncture to also seeing private patients there, because they had rooms in one of their offices, and I could see private patients there. And then, gosh, I want to say probably 2 years after I started the community clinic, I started working with my friend in North Star in Westerville, and that's where I'm at now. Okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the other key challenges you had to overcome. So I know one was, hey, is this really worth it? I'm still working a side job. Then you go from that to, okay, now things are starting to pick up where people are coming in and out of the door every 15 minutes. Yeah. But I'm not as proficient enough to do this in 15 minutes. I needed 30 minutes to set up. Sure. What were some of the other key challenges that came along with that?
Feeling like I was I don't know how to put this exactly. So when I was in school, I remember one of my instructors saying to me, like, for years, I felt like a fraud. Like, I felt like I was just impersonating an acupuncturist and wasn't, I didn't really, not that she didn't know what she was doing, obviously she knew she was a practitioner, licensed. But I think getting to the point where, I felt like, okay, yeah, this is who I am, and I actually know what I'm doing, and look at all these people that I'm helping, and this is real, and I think that was something that was kind of a game changer for me, getting to the point where you realize that, you are doing it and you are helping people, and that was always the name of the game. That's why you started it, and you're doing it, and from there it just kind of takes off. It's like it takes off like this organic life of its own, and it kind of branches out on its own, and things develop that you didn't even realize you were setting into play, and until it's already bearing fruit, you're like, oh wow, okay.
So at what point in your practice did you start to feel that? When did that confidence finally hit you?
Not that long ago.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think around the time that I was doing, I signed up for herb school.
Okay.
I think around that time, so it's like 2017-ish. So I've been practicing for years.
Right. What, 5 years at that point?
Yeah,
Right.
and feeling like, I mean, and it wasn't that I wasn't having success. I was having great results with a lot of patients, and people were coming back and saying, oh yeah, and they're recommending me and sending me their family and friends and everything. But it was just kind of this internal voice, and that's something I think I've always dealt with, and I think a lot of people probably do.
Absolutely.
Just kind of that self-doubt and lack of confidence, until I got to the point where I'm like, I'm the real deal. I'm doing it, and I think it is time to level up. And that's when I was like, I signed up for the herb program, and I got through that, which was a challenge. I thought that would come a lot easier to me than it did, because of like my cooking background. Actually was one thing. I was like, this is gonna be just like, following a recipe, and it was not. It's incredibly challenging. The number, just the sheer volume of knowledge that is in the materia medica is what they use, and just the single herbs, and then the combination of the herbs and how they interact and the dosages, and it's crazy.
So are these consumable herbs, or?
Yeah. So they're most of them are plants. Some of them are minerals. Some of them are animal parts, and they traditionally they will put them into a pot. They'll cook them down. They'll strain the fluids into what's called a decoction. Okay. And you will consume the decoction.
Really?
Yeah. Now sometimes it's a powder. They also use like paste for like topicals. Sometimes it's more of like just a drink, like a tea. Okay. But yeah, and now these days though, because patient compliance with the traditional methods is a little low. It's hard time. We have a hard time getting people to cook the herbs and then continue to take them, because a lot of times they don't taste great. But they work. Right. They work wonders. So these days, a lot of them are granulated, so it comes in a powder, and you just kind of drop that into a glass of warm water, stir it up, drink it as a draft, or you'll have patent herbs which come in capsules, which look very much like nutritional supplements. Okay. And you'll take a few a day.
So the powder, is that something that you just rub on your skin?
The powder is usually, you'll pour it into a glass of warm water, and you'll stir it up, and you'll drink it.
Oh, okay.
Like a smoothie. It's the consistency is not. It's usually more like a watered down smoothie, but
right.
Yeah.
So how did you have so much faith in becoming an acupuncturist, knowing that it wasn't that popular? Because I think a lot of times, and I think this is more for me and for our listeners, that you have people who look at things that could be an industry changer, if it's 5 years from now or 10 years from now, but they're scared to venture down that path because it's not as popular or as known. How did you stay the path, knowing that you were diving into something that may have not have been as popular or the interesting topic of conversation?
Sure. I've always been kind of a nonconformist. Okay. So general popularity was never anything that I was all that concerned with to begin with. And when I told my dad about it, he was less enthused than I was hoping he would be.
Uh-huh.
He was actually very concerned about the religious aspect of it because my family is very traditional Catholic, from our roots,
Okay.
Mexican Catholics, and he was worried I was going to become a Buddhist and it was going to, I was going to, like, I don't know what he thought, honestly. I don't know if he thought Buddhism was a cult or what, but, but no, I mean, I think that once I decided that that's what I wanted to do, the popularity of it wasn't really what I was concerned with. What I was concerned with was being as good as I possibly could be at it.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what I was convinced would set me apart, you know.
So being an acupuncturist, geez, I don't even say it that often to pronounce it the correct way, but being an acupuncturist, what sets you apart from the other competitors in the city or within the state? Because I'm sure you attend other like conferences and events and stuff like that, and you have a lot of these same conversations.
Yeah. I think one thing, and actually I even remember one of my instructors back when I was in school, she told me, she's like, oh, you're going to be okay because patients are going to like you. It won't even matter how good you are. Like, I'm not sure that's a compliment.
Right.
But I think my bedside manner actually is what works wonders for me when it comes to patient relations.
Okay.
Practitioner-patient relations. There's a lot of practitioners that are very concerned with numbers and seeing as many patients as possible in a day's time so that they can be as profitable as possible. And taking nothing away from that, yeah, I get it. I would love to see some of those numbers. They're seeing like 40 some patients a day.
Wow.
And I'm sure their accounts show it.
Right.
But there's a personal connection that I think would probably be missing from that. That I think is really critical for my practice. Like the connection that I share with my patients is something that I find enriching. Not only from a practitioner standpoint, but personally. I enjoy talking to people about what's going on with them and how this has improved their lives and where we could, see some more improvement or, what they would like to focus on or if there's something else that they want to address. And then progressing just past just the acupuncture degree, I think is something else that sets me apart. I mean, there's other practitioners that have done the herb program, but there's not a lot of us here of the acupuncturists in Ohio who have gone through the doctorate program yet. And that's another reason that was important for me because I did want to differentiate myself. And I wanted the additional skill sets that was going to provide. Exactly. There's interprofessional communication that's really a big focus of that program. The focus on the current research, the clinical research that's being done now, that's applicable to my practice. I find immensely fascinating, and it's I can use it right now, for the benefit of my patients.
Okay.
So I think those are probably the main things that I would say set me apart. But I think my technique is probably I try to make it as painless as possible.
Okay.
I know there are some practitioners out there that say, oh no, you have to elicit the sensation, you have to, really generate that. But a lot of these people are coming to me already in pain. They're already experiencing pain. So if I can give them relief without having to induce any more discomfort, then that's my preference. And I know that that's something that I kind of developed over time in the community clinic, and people would specifically ask me about that, like, what's your needling technique? How did you learn to do it so painlessly? And I honestly, this is going to sound crazy. The only thing that I can really attribute that to is the time that I spent as a contractor driving nails into wood with a hammer. Because a metal shaft will behave very specifically when you manipulate it, depending on how you hit that nail on the head. And it'll twist, it'll turn, it'll bend if you don't hit it true.
Right.
Right. And a needle behaves very similar when going through tissue. And you can bend it, you can flex it, but if you're not doing it quite right, it'll do something you don't want it to do,
Right.
and you can see it in a patient's reaction.
You know what? That makes sense because I can think about when I have to go to the lab to get blood work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if I take my dad.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not good with that needle, like my dad, he doesn't like needles. It's like, hey,
Sure.
if you don't do it right the first time, and you have to use the butterfly needle, right? You don't do it right the first time, I don't want you to
Sure.
do it. But some phlebotomists, they have the technique where
Yeah.
they put it in, and you're just like, oh, you're actually done
It's
already.
like butter,
so it sounds very
right?
similar.
Yeah, and that's what I strive for. I want it to be smooth. I want it to be as painless as possible. And you know, granted, some points are just more sensitive than others, and I don't always succeed. Sometimes there is some discomfort. But I tell those patients, you know, really when I get that really strong sensation, that's all the stimulation we need. So we can take that needle out, and you'll still get the effect. And I believe that to be true.
Nice. So when it comes to reviews, right, I guess I really want to understand, how do you get feedback in your practice to start to educate other people on your practice? Because for the people who are skeptical
Sure.
and don't really believe in it or don't want it, what are you doing to really push the agenda to educate people and say, hey, we want you to see proof. We actually want you to see reviews or surveys or whatever to show that this actually works.
That's a challenge, you know. Honestly, things like this are great. That's why I was so excited about this. You know, I was like,
Thank
man,
you.
this is a great opportunity. You know, I get some free marketing, you get some content.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
I think we even had that conversation.
Right, right.
But you know, I do speaking engagements. I did a speaking engagement at a job fair for a mutual friend of ours not too long ago at a school, and you know, just things like that. And as far as like specific outcomes, I mean, if you could get testimonials, those are great. But you know, those in medicine we consider those anecdotal, and you know, from a practitioner standpoint, yeah, they sound great, but you know, I want to see numbers, and that's a little tough unless you're participating in clinical trials. It's tough to generate that kind of stuff. But that's what clinical trials are for. You can provide them with that if patients have specific inquiries regarding, you know, treatments for, you know, X condition, you know, you can say, okay, well, here's the research that, you know, that's been done on that specific condition, and you know, we can definitely go down that road. But yeah, it's always a challenge, you know, getting the word out there, and fortunately, I think a lot of people are much more knowledgeable about it these days. They come in, especially the people that are kind of, you know, inquisitive to begin with. They've already Googled it, you know. They, you
exactly.
know, they at least have an idea. And it's surprising how many people have already had acupuncture when they come into my office. They're like, yeah, I used to go to so-and-so, or I had it years ago, and so I don't even really have to go through the whole song and dance with them. They already know.
Okay.
So it's a lot better than it used to be.
Nice.
Yeah.
So give us a success story, like that one story that stands out in your mind that, man, this is very helpful, very beneficial, or whatever, you know, path or route you want to take with that success story.
Man, yeah, there's been quite a few over the years. I think I had one of my veterans that came to see me through the community clinic. He was a big guy, and the veteran patients that I see, because I actually work with the VA now again. I worked with them back when I was with the community clinic, and when I left the community clinic, my credentialing with them lapsed, so I had to go back through the whole process. But back when I was working with the community clinic, and I had one of my veterans come in, just chronic knee problems. Ever since he was in the service, and the folks that come through the VA, the severity of their injuries and conditions, the you know, is just more significant than the general population. They are just they're beat up by the time they get to me.
Right.
And a lot of them go into law enforcement, and they continue to be beat up. So one guy was he came in and his knees were they just made him miserable. He had tried everything else, the cortisone injections, you know, they were talking about surgery and replacement. And I think within 3 sessions he was already saying, like, this is probably 85% better than it has with any other treatments. And we continued to work on it. And he would have, you know, he would have setbacks where it would kind of flare up on him, but every time it would get worse, he would come back in. We do acupuncture. We actually did cupping on his knees too, which was a little out of the ordinary for me. It's not something I do very often because it's just hard to get the cups to adhere to the knees. But he was big enough and he had enough surface area around his knees that we were able to do that, and it was the only thing that worked for him. Another one of my vets. This is a story that I tell all the time for people that don't know about cupping. Another one of my vets, he was active law enforcement at the time, and he had, his medical record was just remarkable, and the number and severity of injuries that he had sustained over the course of his service, and of the and in the line of duty, as an officer. And he could only raise his arms up to about maybe the 30 or 40 degree mark. Wow. As far as range of motion goes, like now that's adducting away from his side. We did, I want to say by the second round of cupping, he was up to 90 degrees. By the third or fourth round of cupping, he had his hands up over his head. And it's remarkable when cupping is the right modality, it is exceptional in its effectiveness. And it works very quickly. Usually when the person is done with their treatment, like they feel better immediately. Yeah.
So cupping, what's cupping? Let's talk about that a little bit more.
Cupping, Chinese medicine's been around for thousands of years.
Right.
And, and cupping actually, I think originally came from the Middle East.
Okay.
And the Chinese, found it to be effective and incorporated into Chinese medicine. And I think it came over, obviously Chinese medicine came over around the 70s, or the Nixon era. But it didn't really start to gain popularity till fairly recently, maybe the 90s, I think, is when it started to be a little more mainstream. Cupping specifically, though, I think really took off when people saw Michael Phelps with his cupping marks when he was in the Olympics. And people started researching it. Essentially what cupping is a therapeutic, because in Chinese medicine, like I mentioned before, anytime you have a fixed pain condition, there's said to be a stagnation of energy and blood. So the treatment principle is to always move energy and blood and relieve the pain. And acupuncture can do this, but it takes some time. Cupping physically draws the blood out of the tissue that are deep to the cups, and when it does that, it allows fresh blood, fluids, and nutrients into that tissue. Now, that's going to facilitate any healing processes that need to take place, but it also improves the elasticity of the tissue itself, and at either end of that muscle tissue is connective tissue that's attached to the skeletal structure. And when you improve that elasticity, it takes the tension off of that connective tissue, which takes the tension, which takes some of the pressure off of the skeleton itself. And I think that's what goes a long way in, relieving pain conditions. Okay. But I think also if there is trauma of any kind, it's also helping that recovery process through the, the fresh blood, fluids, and nutrients that make their way into the tissue. And the cupping marks that are left on the body, a lot of people think those are bruises. It's actually petechia. So that's just the blood coming out of the tissue deep to the cups, up to the superficial layers of the skin, and actually, it does rupture the superficial capillaries, but it's painless. It's not. There might be a little residual soreness, but it's not like a bruise where you press it and it hurts.
Right.
So some people use cupping for detoxification. I don't use it for that as much. I think there's more controlled methods for detoxifying the body if you're wanting to do that, like homeopathy and stuff like that. But yeah, when it's the right modality, cupping is remarkably effective and it works very quickly.
Okay, so cupping. So is it just like, I don't know, like a suction cup or something like that?
There's a couple different methods. Traditionally, they use they'll take a glass cup and they'll light a cotton swab that's been soaked in alcohol. They'll light it on fire, and they'll put it in the cup, and then rapidly place the cup on the body. As the air inside the cup cools, that's what creates the vacuum. Okay. There's machines that you can use that create that vacuum. There's handheld pumps that you can use that also could be used to create the vacuum. Whatever the technique is, there's always a vacuum that's created in the cup, and that's what draws that blood up to the surface of the skin.
Does it burn when you light the cotton ball?
The cotton ball's on fire. That's why they call it fire cupping. Right. But it's very quick, the process. Okay. So you have the cup in this hand, you put the ball in the cup, and it's about that quick.
Okay.
You know, so sometimes you'll go around the surface of the cup just to warm the cup up, put the ball in, or put the cotton ball in, and then it's right on the surface of the body. And that's actually how you moderate the intensity of the suction. Is like you put the cotton ball in longer, and you put it on the body. That air in there is the temperature's higher, so when you put it on the body and it cools, it's going to create more suction. If you do it real quick, it's less suction.
Okay. And how long do you have to keep it on your skin?
There's a couple of ways to approach that. Most commonly, what I'll do is I'll put the cups on the body and I'll leave one round for about 10 minutes or so, and then I'll come back and I'll take them off and I'll do another round like in between the spots that we worked on.
Okay.
And I'll leave those on, usually not quite as long, maybe 7 to 10 minutes tops. There's another technique where you place the cup on the body. Well, actually, you put like a lubricant on the body, like an oil of some kind. You place the cup on the body with a little bit lighter suction, and then you slide it back and forth. It's called sliding cupping. There's actually another technique where you elicit bleeding, and then you place the cup on the body, and it draws blood out of the body itself. It's called wet cupping. I don't really do that. You have to have a specific setup for that, and just from a liability standpoint, it's you have to be careful.
Why is that?
Bloodborne pathogens. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
which one would you say is more effective? You know, the needles or the cupping?
it depends on the condition that you're working on.
Okay.
You know, musculoskeletal pain, if it's more excess in nature, which means basically like if you push on something and it makes the problem worse, that's considered to be an excess condition.
Okay.
Cupping is probably going to be more effective. If you have something where it's a little more deficient, acupuncture is probably the way to go.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So as far as industry standards and trends, right? So you said with Chinese medicine, it's something that's been around for over 3,000 years, right? Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Roughly, I mean, give or take.
Right. So how do you stay current on the trends in terms of like continuing education? Is it reading, events, conferences?
All of the above.
All right. And you're also in school. I forgot about that.
Right, right. Well, the doctoral program has definitely been giving me a leg up on that. But, I mean, as far as the medical board requires us to get 60 CEUs every 4 years.
Okay.
So, I mean, we, by default, have to continue our education if we want to maintain our licensure. So, absolutely, yeah. And that usually involves classes of some kind or online coursework or seminars or, you know, I think we had the symposium not too long ago through my university that was out in San Diego, and there would be CEUs offered through that. So there's a few different ways to do it, but yeah, I mean, continuing education is always a priority.
Okay. So this is something that I ask all my guests, right? Yep. So speaking to the young Rick out there who wants to take a similar path, you know, becoming an acupuncturist, or just starting their own practice or starting their own business or becoming an entrepreneur, what advice would you give?
You know, have a plan. I think if I would have had a more solid plan getting started, I probably would have achieved my my independence as far as my private practice goes a little sooner.
Okay.
You know, and having some structure in place. That support network is critical. So. And it's hard to really fabricate that, so I'm not sure how you would go about that. But, right. You know, just getting some instruction on the best steps to take. Specifically getting into acupuncture, know that you're probably going to have to work a side job to start off with. You're probably going to have, unless you have, you know, a fund of some kind to support you as you build your practice, or you have, you know, a significant other that's able to help you financially. Just know that it's going to be a struggle, just like any other business. And don't get discouraged. Don't let it deter you if you know that's what you want to do.
Okay. Yeah. So as far as balancing work life and personal life, at the beginning when you first graduated, you're in practice. Let's just say 2015, because that's when you got married, right? Yep. So still had a few challenges as far as getting clients, customers, or patients, I should say. What did you have to do to balance both while you're still working on your practice and still giving your son time, and your kids and your grandkids and your wife time?
Sure. You know, that's always a challenge. Fortunately, back then I wasn't super busy, so I had more time to give to them.
Right.
But you know, just be aware, you know, and look for signs that, things aren't going well, and, that way it can kind of help you adjust course, whether it be at practice or at home. Just be present when you're able to, and be cognizant of how the things that you do in one can affect the other, whether that be at work or at home, and know that there's always, you have a finite amount of time and energy to donate to either, and finding that happy medium is always a challenge, but it's definitely doable, and keeping an open dialogue with everybody is immensely helpful.
Okay.
Yep.
So what's a tip that you would give to someone that's trying to keep that open dialogue? Because, some people, they can get frustrated with that.
Sure.
They may think that you don't believe in me, you're questioning what I'm doing. So what's the best way to keep that open dialogue and communication?
Maybe just having a check-in time where you regularly check in with the person, whether that's a certain time of day, whether that's like as you guys are getting ready to go to turn in for the night, or when you both get home from your respective occupations, and kind of touching base with that person, just to make sure that they're okay and see if there's something that they need, and you can also use that time to convey your needs if there's something that you feel like you're not getting. That would probably be my suggestion.
Okay. So what do you do to kind of just unwind, relax, have fun?
I really like riding my motorcycle.
Okay. Okay.
I got a bike a couple years back, and yeah, that's my go-to. But aside from it, because I can only do that so much, especially when it's cold out. So
exactly.
Aside from that, I like to watch the Buckeyes play, football when they, not necessarily last night, but
Right.
But I enjoy watching them play, and
Okay.
just spending time with my granddaughters. That just rejuvenates me in ways that I can't explain.
Okay.
So, but yes, spending time with friends and family, that's probably my go-to.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to contact you, to take advantage of your services or just get a little more education, how can they find you on social media, maybe even your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So, North Star Acupuncture is the name of the practice. We're in Uptown Westerville, 253 North State Street, Suite 100. The number, let me get that here because I can never remember it.
Right. That's okay.
Yeah, number is 614-776-4650. And the website is northstaracupuncture.net. You can book online, so feel free to check out the website. My information's on there, and my business partner's on there, and yeah, it kind of tells a little bit more about what we do and all of that thing. I'm on Instagram at Healing Balance for You.
Okay.
And then Rick Aguirre on Facebook as well. LAC. Yep.
All right. Any other value you want to add?
You know what? This has been great. I just want to express my gratitude to you for reaching out to me and giving me some additional exposure. That's always phenomenal.
Absolutely.
The best kind of marketing is free marketing.
Yes, sir.
Can't beat that. And it was great to catch up with you, and I wish you all the best. And I think this is just a phenomenal opportunity for anybody that that you give a chance to empower them, empower those people out there that might be considering getting into some kind of entrepreneurship of their own. And I wish you all the best, man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank
you.
you.
I'll tell you what, man, it's been a lot of education, a lot of knowledge, a lot of stuff that I've been wanting to ask for a long time. Like, I can remember when you were in school and you told me what you were going to school for. And I'm like, oh, okay. Knew nothing about it. Always wanted to ask, and finally get an opportunity to ask 13 years later. Right?
Yeah,
but I'm glad you educated us, got a chance to really break it down on a level to where we understand it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, this has been pretty cool, man.
Absolutely.
So, hey.
Awesome.
This was a great interview, great close by Rick. Make sure we'll put all of the information down in the description. And we want to thank you for joining the Let's Evolve for Tomorrow podcast, where we help aspiring, new, and existing entrepreneurs excel to the next level by inviting other aspiring, new, and existing entrepreneurs to the podcast to provide valuable information on how to get to the next level. And we'll see you next time.